Welcome to the University of Washington and the Office of Public Lecturers special weekly series, Coexisting with COVID. I'm Hanson Hossein, co-director of the Communication Leadership Master's Program and your host for the next 5 weeks. Every Thursday, with the help of some of the UW's top experts, we'll explore what could be our new normal as we adapt to the ongoing disruption of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're doing so in partnership with the Graduate School, UW Marketing and Communications, the Population Health Initiative, uwvideo, and my own Department of Communication. This evening, COVID-19 and the truth. While we're inundated with information about COVID-19, we seem to know so little, so it compels us to find truth where we can, however we can. Earlier through your registration confirmation email, we asked you to use the Thought Exchange platform to respond to this prompt. What piece of information have you questioned the most? And here are the results. We'll be using Thought Exchange later for your questions to our experts. Joining us to help us figure out how to tell what's true are Kate Starbird and Jevin West from the university's recently launched Center for an Informed Public. Kate is an associate professor in human-centered design and engineering. Her research focuses on how information and communication technologies are used during crisis events. More recently, Kate has focused on disinformation and other forms of strategic information operations online. Jevin is an associate professor at the UW's Information School. He's also the inaugural director of the new Center for an Informed Public. Currently, his research focuses on misinformation, specifically in and about science. What would you like to ask our panelists? Use the Thought Exchange platform to submit your questions or vote on which questions are most important to you. It's important that we hear from you for the second half of our time together, so please do use the QR code you see on your screen right now to share your thoughts. You can even snap a photo of that QR code with your smartphone. Well, welcome, Kate and Jevin.
Thanks, Hanson, and thanks to everyone for coming this evening.
So I mentioned that we had that kickoff thought exchange question, and here was some of the commonalities in terms of what people were most interested in. You know, what is the truth about needing a vaccine moving forward? Is there such thing as post-infection immunity? Will face masks in public actually help stop the spread? Will it be safe to attend sporting events? And has the government done all it can do to ramp up testing? And so you can sort of see a common thread to some of those concerns and questions that even as we're pivoting to this next phase of the crisis, as we begin to adapt to it, there's some real elemental questions around the truth. And so, Kate, I'll put it to you first. And as you've been monitoring the situation from the beginning, what do you see changing around information and misinformation and the truth with regards to this crisis?
Yeah, I think those examples are great, and they really underscore the uncertainty and the actual scientific uncertainty that's characterizing this event. We're facing sort of this unprecedented extended period of time where there's a lot of open questions. And in that case, like, the best information today may not be the best information tomorrow. And that makes these conditions that are sort of ripe for the spread of misinformation. And that's typical of every crisis, is that when we have uncertainty and anxiety, we have a tendency to try to resolve that uncertainty and anxiety, and that can kind of stir the rumor mill and cause rumors and false information to spread. But but in this event, we have this persistent uncertainty. And we've seen early on in the event, we've seen these people trying to grapple with these answers, come together, science is moving, try to figure out what's going on. And sometimes they get it wrong, and sometimes they get it right? And a lot of what we saw early on was this sort of, when we saw misinformation, it was unintentional, the people kind of well-meaning trying to figure things out. As the event kind of goes on, what we're seeing is more of a shift from unintentional misinformation to intentional misinformation, as people who might want to exploit us for financial or political gain are entering these online information systems and trying to bend them in ways that benefit them. And we're seeing sort of COVID-19 start intersecting with election 2020 and seeing the politicization of a lot of information. And that can lead to the spread of misinformation as well. So that's really the shift I'm seeing as time goes on, from the sort of unintentional to more intentional misinformation in the online spaces.
Well, Kate, given that you do study information and misinformation, particularly in crisis situations, how much of this is really par for the course in the ongoing journey of a pandemic, and how much of this is surprising or different given what you've mentioned, both the election year as well as potentially the technology that has exacerbated the situation?
Yeah, I can't say that anything has particularly surprised me about this event because a lot of the rumors we see look like things we've seen before. A lot of the conspiracy theories are almost the exact same as we've seen before in other events, just carried over to this event. And so I haven't seen like qualitative difference. I think the difference right now is just quantitative of just the amount of different rumors that are spreading because of the sort of unprecedented global nature of this event, with a long period of uncertainty to kind of stir the rumor mill, and our conditions in our online spaces that are already sort of characterized by, pervasive misinformation, disinformation, and intentional manipulation. And so nothing really surprises me, but certainly it's sort of a perfect storm for the spread of misinformation.
So, Jevin, once in a lifetime crisis. Kate says that it is following certain patterns. However, how's the truth doing so far?
Well, just like truth itself is really, really hard to get at, measuring how well the truth is doing is probably even more difficult. And that's something that we're struggling with, not just in our center and in the field that studies misinformation and disinformation, but I think generally in the population. This is partly why we're talking about this today. And what's interesting about this particular event, as Kate had mentioned, is this engagement with science too, working in real time. And one of the things that got me excited as a kid to go into science was that it had some tools for getting at truth. And sometimes, even when we're all on the same side and we're not trying to deceive each other, it's still really hard. Now, imagine you throw an environment where there really are no rules, or at least rules that can be enforced, and people can deceive, they can try to trick you to make money, they can try to push narratives. It makes it even harder. So is truth doing better than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, from the previous crisis, from last year? Well, we need a metric, first of all, to measure how good truth is, but I don't even know if that exists. So I would just say that how truth is doing, this worldwide pandemic, that even when we're all working on it together, it's really hard to get at that truth.
So I got to ask you.
Everyone's realizing how hard it is, even when we're mostly on the same team and trying to solve this worldwide pandemic, that even when we're all working on it together, it's really hard to get at that truth.
So I got to ask you how you're doing personally, Jevin, because, you set up this new center for the informed public back in December. I think you were looking to ramp it up slowly just in time for the election. And all of a sudden you're confronted with this incredible crisis, which is rampant with information and misinformation. How do you step up to that? How's it feeling? Are you feeling you've got to actually take advantage of this, or is it just too much of a fire hose?
Well, we're not sleeping much as a start. I would say all the researchers working in the center, all the students, the postdocs that will be joining us. I mean, no one's really sleeping right now. There's just too many things to be working on. But it is pretty crazy, Hanson, how back in December, which seems like a lifetime ago, we were launching the center. And we were thinking about big events like the election, like the census, like other, more generally about trying to help improve our information ecosystems, to understand it, to engage in the community around this issue. And then, bam, COVID came along. Which really, I mean, it's, this crisis event and the rumors and misinformation that are sort of circling around it is kind of the expertise we have in our center with Kate Starbird and Emma Spiro that have spent their careers thinking about this. And so I do feel lucky to be a part of a group where I wouldn't say we're overly prepared, but we have a little bit of preparation for something like this. And also just the work from other scholars in the center that are thinking a lot about how to engage society with science and the tools at getting at sort of truth and the misinformation that even can sort of get itself in that bridge between science and misinformation. So yeah, we have this center. We sort of were setting it up for maybe something like this, and lo and behold, it was weeks later before we had to really get to work in real time.
So, Kate, I have to ask you this. I mean, it's so easy to feel despondent about the current state of information in our ecosystem that we exist in the last few years. So many concerns around social media, Facebook and Twitter. Facebook just set up this new sort of Supreme Court in terms of what information will appear and what is misinformation and how to deal with that. And so we would think that we're just awash in misinformation and how can we function as a society. At the same time, as we've looked at the last few weeks in terms of how we dealt with this pandemic, it seems like half the world has actually agreed to say, this is happening. We will shelter in place. We will socially distance. We will listen to the experts and to our governments and try to do something together. And so it seems like it's not so bad in terms of how the truth is coexisting with us, or am I just misleading myself?
It is a time for us to try to find hopeful notes. And I do get asked sometimes if there has been anything that has surprised me. And this is kind of a sad story because I've been studying mis and disinformation so long that I've become a little bit cynical, and my expectations may have been pretty low. And as I saw this kind of crisis developing and thought about what was going to happen and how we'd have to come together around a shared reality in order to take the actions that we were going to need to protect ourselves. But from here in Seattle, from the perspective of Seattle, I look around and people really did listen. They accepted what was being told them by the local officials, by our governor, by our public health officials and things. And we really did converge around an understanding for quite a while, 6 to 8 weeks, and said, you know what, we're gonna do what we need to do to protect ourselves and to protect our community. And to a large part, we can see right now that has really, lowered the impact in terms of loss of life in our community. And it does look hopeful. It still looks scary and very ambiguous for us, but I do feel like Seattle's really been a success story about, listening to experts and really taking the actions that we needed to protect our community.
For you, Jevin, as we face this inflection point, as we move from just the day-to-day crisis, just sort of learning how to live with this thing, how do you feel? You're the person who's been specializing in this global course called Calling BS, knowing that there's so much out there to refute around misinformation. Does this give you hope, or do we have a lot of work to do here?
Well, we certainly have a lot of work to do, but I agree with Kate that it is surprising in a good way that people really have responded. And if you look at recent surveys, just even in the last couple of weeks, there's pretty broad support across the political spectrum for at least some form of social distancing, which I think is good. And it means that people are trusting to some degree these institutions that specialize in this, whether it's the World Health Organization or the CDC or our own national and local governments. And what's interesting about trust itself in this particular crisis, and also probably outside the crisis too, is that science has remained, the trust in science has remained relatively high, when in fact, many of the other institutions, there has been a pretty dramatic erosion of trust, media, unfortunately, even the governments and other institutions, there's been this erosion, but science has remained quite high. Now, when you ask, how do I feel? I think I feel tired a lot of times. I think this has really made me tired. I think all of us tired and exhausted. And I think one of the things that we can do is make sure that we are sort of taking breaks from all the information too, because we're in it for the long haul. As you've titled this, this, which is a great title, Coexisting with COVID. And I think we are going to be coexisting. We'll have as much access to as much information as we want. So we do just need to be a little bit careful about not overindulging too much in that information.
Given that we are going to move into the Q&A portion of this conversation very soon, I just want to ask you one more question based on this coexistence. What would be your absolute best advice to anybody as we do make this transition into the next phase of this pandemic, in terms of what should they do concretely to coexist from an information and truth point of view with this situation?
Yeah, I've been giving, some variations of recommendations over the years, but, in recent days, I've begun to coalesce around a couple of ideas. We've talked about having people sort of slow down and be more in tune to how information may be manipulating us emotionally, because it taps into our emotions to get itself spread. Misinformation doesn't spread itself, we spread it, but it can manipulate us into spreading it. And so slowing down, kind of attending to where we might be manipulated, but also taking some responsibility of where we are in these systems. It is our act of spreading it that causes misinformation to spread. And it's okay. Sometimes we make mistakes, and that's going to happen. And I think we should reflect upon it and not and maybe try to do better in the future. But also we need to learn how to correct ourselves and to take responsibility and say, I'm not just going to hide. I made a mistake. I'm not just going to hide it or delete it or leave it up. I'm actually going to correct it, say I was wrong, point people to the right information, the right source, and then tell people who might have shared my information or my misinformation that they might have made a mistake too. I think if we start to take some responsibility of our role in these spaces, that we can all together help to make a more healthy information space.
That's great advice, like responsibility and accountability. Jevin, did you want to add anything to that before we move to some very concrete questions from our audience?
Well, the only thing I'd add is maybe we should have like a top 100 people that have admitted the most number of good things. They admitted I was wrong, and here's the ways in which you can fix that. And then we start to, maybe incentivize that kind of behavior. Because I think Kate's exactly right. I think if we would admit mistakes more, because we all make mistakes. Actually, one of the slides that I end one of my lectures that's related to this kind of content that we're talking about today is to sort of, make sure that you're calling BS on yourself as much as everyone else. And so I think that would be an important thing. But definitely during this time, because there's so much information out there, is definitely to take a break. If you're one of those individuals that just really needs to dive in and wants to learn some of the science, I guess you can use it as an excuse to learn more about the science and also appreciate, I guess, how difficult it is to get at this, and also ways that science uses to measure uncertainty. I think for people to say, I don't want to take a break, because I've said that many times, but I don't want to take a break, I want to learn more. I say, well, one thing to learn is the methods by which we sort of deal with uncertainty in science, and then come back to my class and teach it for me.
Well, you put a huge challenge before us, Jevin, because we've so associated our identity with how we express ourselves online that to actually admit fault or to sort of say, no, I'm going to take a little time to be self-reflective is hard, but I'm hoping that people are listening to you and taking that advice. So I want to go to some very good questions we've received so far on the Thought Exchange platform with regard to what you've both been talking about. And Kate, maybe I'll try you first on this and see how it goes. How do we know if we can trust the COVID data when it is collected in so many different ways? Or how do we know what is misinformation in this situation?
Yeah, I think, that actually speaks to the same issue that we have of this persistent uncertainty. And even when we have collected data about things, it's imperfect data. The numbers are being reported in different ways, in different places. Sometimes they spike because on Mondays, because on Sunday they don't actually report the deaths or whatever it is. And so we have all these different kinds of information. I think over time, as scientists, you learn how to account for the limitations of the data. You learn how to account for the differences across across the different reporting techniques. But it takes some time, and that speaks again to there are uncertainties. The best data right now, the best information right now may change in a few weeks as we get more information about things. And even the science is going to be improving. Science doesn't go from A to Z. It goes from A, B, C, back to B again, or we get a correction, then we jump over to E. Most important, it's a while to get where it's going. And I think understanding that things are dynamic and uncertain is one of the most important things, I think, intellectually with dealing with this pandemic. It's just understand things are going to change, and the truth, the best information is actually going to change over time. And we've got to learn to be okay with that, because that's the situation we're in.
Do you see a shift happening where there's been a rebellion against expertise in science to a certain degree over the last few years that has led to some really surprising political changes around the world? Is there a resurrection of this need, or at least trust in science, from what you're seeing so far, Kate?
I don't have, the data on measuring trust in science right now. I think those studies are being done. I definitely think that when we shift away from conversations about politics and some of these things that we've all already got we know where we stand on these different sides, and switch to this sort of collective problem of fighting a disease that is taking the lives of our friends and family members and community members, it does give us an opportunity to come together in a different way around these conversations. And all of a sudden, scientists, that's all we have. We need scientists, because otherwise we're just guessing and going off of our intuition, and that's probably not going to get it done in a global pandemic. And so I think, the value of the experts, people, people are smart, and, and even if they're devaluing experts in these sort of political ways for whatever reasons, which there is some evidence has happened, when all of a sudden it comes to life or death, that can change your perspective on how you see an expert.
Jevin, this next question is for you as director of the new Center for the Informed Public. Has the center offered to bring truthiness tools to journalists or even to the White House?
That's a good question. Everyone needs it, just like I said. We all need it, including the White House. There's not a group or institution that doesn't always need extra tools. I don't know that we have all the magic sauce. Really, it's working together with our communities, research communities, our local communities in which we live and reside here in Washington, for sure. But we are actually working very much with journalists. Just this week, I've probably spent more than 5-6 hours in conversations with journalists either about COVID and misinformation around it, or just about the role that journalism, in particular local journalism, the role they can play in helping with this event and any event. And I'm almost, anyone else that might be on this have heard me before because they're almost getting bored of me saying this, but if I had that magic wand, it really would be, and I got one wish or a genie in a bottle or whatever we want to use, I got one, I would say to resurrect local journalism around the world, for sure. But in the United States, that the decimation of local journalists is really one of the sort of things that I would want to fix more than almost anything. And so that for sure. But I will say this about journalists and tools. There are a lot of tools that are helping journalists become more savvy with data. So we're actually, there's people at our university, University of Washington, and other universities around the country that are going to journalist conferences, providing some of the new data science tools to help them become more adept with the data, to help them with visualization techniques and tools, to help them collectively fact check. There's all sorts of things that we can all help journalists, because being a journalist is hard. They're not getting paid much, and there's not enough of them. Just to throw one stat out there, science journalists around the country, the one that I recently read is there is about 74 full-time science journalists on staff. Now, of course, there's freelancers and stuff out there too, but we need way more journalists, especially during an event like this.
Given what you said about journalism, Jevin, I want to ask you another question about that. I just also want to point out that I've noticed, even in the last week, that KUW here locally and the New York Times have reported really great sort of flourishing numbers, both in terms of fundraising and subscriptions. So I think people are recognizing that journalism is really crucial, especially now. One question we received is, what sources for information about COVID-19 do you believe are most reliable and without political bias? Have you been able to get a sense of that?
That's a really good question. And we get this question often in the center, like, what news sources do you use? What's your diet of news? Tell us. And when it comes to COVID, at least for me, I can speak for myself, but we also are going to be putting some resources out in our new center. We're going to have a new webpage about these kinds of things, at least more generally about misinformation and media literacy. But I would say when it comes to COVID, I rely very much on the organizations like, of course, the World Health Organization and the CDC and the NIH, science organizations. When I read things, I typically read them from Nature or Science. Not that to say that they always get it right. Those are places that make mistakes just like anywhere. I do rely on actual experts themselves. There are epidemiologists in our country and in other countries, which I typically want to see what other countries are saying about this too, just so I don't get too stuck on just what those in our country are saying. But I try to rely on experts, and we need experts. No one has the intelligence that I've ever met to be able to assimilate all this information and become an expert. So we have to rely on experts, and we have to rely on these institutions. And so I look to those most often. I, of course, use the news as well too, but I do go and check those sources in combination with the news diet that I have.
That's great. Kate, I'm going to use this question to launch into a sort of peripheral situation. The question was specific about coronavirus antibodies and immunity to the virus and this whole idea of mass immunity. And I know that you're not a science or a medical expert, but it does raise the issue that we had in this state in the last few weeks, where there was a report out of Walla Walla, Washington, that somebody was hosting infection parties where they were inviting somebody who might be infected so they could all get the virus and therefore be immune to it. And just yesterday, and this was on the AP, it was in Seattle Times, and even the health authorities out there said this happened. And then yesterday on Twitter, that health authority refused refuted it and said, actually, that was not the intent of these parties. And so you've got the experts saying it's happening. You have journalism say it's happening. And then all of a sudden it's not happening. And then it throws truth into a tizzy. What do we do in a situation like this when the facts on the ground or the fog of war or whatever are just up in the air?
Yeah, I mean, this is not an atypical type of rumor like this. We might call it a moral panic rumor, something that has some patterns in the past. It's actually mapped on to chickenpox parties that have happened in the past, and someone borrowed that. So we can see how it looks like things we've seen, and yet we understand that we understand now that wasn't true. And I think as a consumer of information, when information providers make mistakes like that, it can undermine our trust in those information providers, and that's dangerous in a situation like this. But one of the things I want to remark on is that we can look to that also as an example of good correction, and actually a pretty quick correction, and a correction that was made in good faith. And so, yes, we should be upset that they didn't get it right the first time, but we should also, especially for the journalists, honor the fact that, like, if they come back and correct the information, that's actually good practice. That's what we all should be doing when we make mistakes. As I said before, everyone's going to make mistakes in this event. Things are moving quickly. We're trying to figure things out. Things are being politicized in ways that are hard for us necessarily to see why it's happening until in retrospect, like, oh, that's where that came from. So not surprising at all to see that kind of rumor. Kind of surprised that it came out of the mouths of officials and then through journalists, but actually we should commend them for correcting it quickly and being honest about it. It's really that acknowledgement of a mistake that gives you a signal that someone is a good faith information provider.
That's a great observation, and it gives me some hope then that things are actually working out pretty well. Jevin, I know that you are a Little League baseball coach. I'm going to throw you a hardball here, but I think it's an interesting question.
I'll probably strike out, I promise you.
As the pandemic has deepened its reach and its impact, and a number of people have died across the country, there's been increasing question around health equity and basically who is being most impacted by this. And there's obviously been sort of initial research about this, but there's also cynicism in the United States about social justice and propaganda and the political take and all of these things. And so how do we navigate, which are really important societal questions around equity, health, and information, when it has become so politicized and there's this clear polarization in terms of how do we help the most vulnerable people who are being affected about this without it becoming a political conversation?
Well, it gets back to actually one of the first question you gave me, Hanson. You said, so how's the truth doing? Well, the truth doesn't do as well when it's got this resistance and this friction of political polarization. And that sort of gets in the way of really getting at things that you would imagine all Americans would be concerned about. If they're true inequities, I think most, you can't say all, but I would say most people would be all for trying to figure out how to solve these issues when we know there has been there's been an unequal response even of just the virus itself, because of some of these socioeconomic issues that we know have been underlying a lot of our country and others for a long time. And so the problem is, it's just that is just as you noted, that the politicization of it, and also all the other things that sort of muddy the ways, the sort of path to getting at truth and to try to solve some of these problems is what we have to contend with. And I think, like I mentioned before, there are scenarios, like, let's say in science, when we're all for working to sort of come up with that drug to solve that ailment. And even in those circumstances, it's really hard to get at the truth. Or if you're within the same company and you have a common goal to get a product out, still, the game of telephone, can get in the way. And so when you then add all these other elements that make it harder to get to the truth, then a lot of these social inequities and these issues that we have in society that we could address if we can all just get on the same page and work towards the same same goals, it becomes difficult.
So final question for our final minutes, perhaps both of you can sound off very quickly, but how do we deal with the constant barrage of information and our constant questioning and anxiety about what is true and what is not? Kate, go for it.
If I had the answer to that, I would be a lot more mentally healthy right now. I mean, this is hard times. Let yourself understand that it's not, this is not easy. It's not easy for any of us. It's not easy for the experts. It's not easy for folks that are just trying to learn about these things for the first time. And these are confusing information spaces, and I would just, have some sympathy for yourself. Take care of yourself, and somehow try to come to terms with the fact that this is going to be an ambiguous situation for a while. We do not like ambiguity, and yet we're going to have to live with that for a few months yet, at least. And just take care of yourselves and your loved ones.
Great advice. Jevin, quick advice for us?
Yeah, I think the quick advice would be, if you are that individual that really wants to do something about it, you can be that person that Kate had mentioned that can help identify when something's misleading. You could admit when you're wrong. You can help journalists source things. You can correct mistakes. You can help put data charts together. There's all sorts of things you can do, but like Kate said, most important, we need to take care of ourselves and our families and our friends, and we're going to get through this. I am an optimist about this, so I thank everyone for listening, and for you and the team, Hanson, for putting this on.
Well, thank you, Kate Starbird and Jevin West, for this enlightening conversation. And thanks to all of you for participating in this important discussion. Join us again next Thursday for Failures in the Public Safety Net. Thanks very much. I'm Hanson Hossein. Have a great night.